my hands were like this.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to take out the actor before the scene. And I'm getting James texting me, just put him in something else. And I'm like, he said no.
Yeah, you come here and tell him.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Costume Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Joy Glass.
And I'm Spencer Williams. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hey, Spencer. How's it going?
It's going. It is. The sun is shining. The allergies are flowing. It's that time of the year again.
I love that the sun's out. It brings me like so much joy and energy. But then like I step outside my house and I'm like, no, not the pollen.
Not again. It's dangerous out here. We just had in California or Los Angeles, we have these things called the Santa Ana winds. I don't know. I don't understand.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
I don't understand the science, so don't ask me. But occasionally this like really horrible windstorm comes through. And we just had it 2 days ago. It literally blew the roof off of my garage. That's how intense it was.
What?
And I didn't know roofs could come off in just one piece like that.
Yeah.
It did.
Have you never seen like video of a tornado?
I mean, I saw Twister before. I mean, but
well, I hope your roof is returned soon.
yeah, it'll work itself out. But yeah. Taking lots of allergy meds, staying home.
Yeah.
It's dangerous outside for us people with allergies. This is the dangerous time.
Oh yeah.
But I also finished school this week. I'm officially done with that degree I was working on. Yeah.
Congratulations. How does it feel to have your bachelor's, to join the club?
It feels good. It's more like, I think the best part so far, it finally kicked in this morning when I got to sit in my bed and I got to just play Dreamlight Valley and not feel guilty about it. Like Donald Duck's giving me like missions to do, like go pick up this fish and go do that. And I finally was like, oh, I could actually do this and not feel guilty about the 3 essays I need to write.
Doesn't it feel nice?
Yeah, it feels nice. Got a lot done. So I'm really stoked about it. I'm excited, and I'm thankful to you and Daniel for sticking by me with my chaotic deadlines as I try to figure how to be a full-time student while running the podcast and the blog at the same time. So I'm stoked. I'm free.
You're free.
What about you? How's the musical going?
Oh, it's going. It's just kind of like last week I kind of really sat down and was like, okay, I need to do like XYZ. And I'm like, oh. And once you realize you need to do XYZ, you're also like, oh, I need to do this and this and this so that I can do XYZ. And then I have to do these other 5 things. And I was like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great.
You're telling me behind the scenes that you're sewing corsets right now?
Yeah, I'm sewing corsets right now.
Man.
Because I picked out, we're doing like a 18th century, like kind of like Rococo theme for Cinderella. And I was like, oh, okay, here are the dresses I want. Like figuring out what I need for those. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get corsets. And then corsets are expensive and I'm working in a budget. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll just have to make them because that's significantly cheaper. So it's going well. It's going great.
Sounds awesome. Glad everything's working out.
Me too.
Well,
oh my gosh.
Elizabeth, it's good to see you. We have a great episode. We have a lot to get to. So what did we watch this week?
So excited. This week we watched the Book of Clarence.
Yeah, I'm excited. It was a great movie. I think I said in our last episode, I didn't know what to expect. Typically like anything that I feel like has any sort of like religious undertones, I'm usually not like super thrilled about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this film just like really was such a pleasant surprise because it really wasn't just that. It really had a lot of different themes, a lot of great fun, color, costumes, an incredible cast. The music is amazing. I loved everything about it, honestly.
I did too. I was very interested to see, because I was like, okay, they're clearly like working around like Jesus's story as well. Like, I was really interested to see what they were going to like do with this. And it was so pleasant. And so like, it was like a fresh take on so many Bible stories.
Yeah.
That have been played out again and again. You're like, oh, I like this.
Right. Also, it's done in like a pretty contemporary way where even someone like me was able to understand it. Honestly, I was like, oh, well, if you would have explained to me like this, I would have got it more.
Like, I get it now.
Yeah. Such a good film. But
So
before we get
good.
into it, perhaps I'll give us a little summary.
Yes, give us a summary, Spencer.
All right. And I'm reading it for the first time, too. So, the Book of Clarence. A down on his luck man struggles to find a better life for his family while fighting to free himself of debt. Captivated by the power and glory of the rising Messiah, he risks everything to carve his own path to a divine life, ultimately discovering that the redemptive power of belief may be his only way out. And that is the Book of Clarence.
That is the Book of Clarence. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a great movie.
Yeah, where did you say you streamed it?
Amazon. You do still have to buy it. It's not free to stream anywhere, but it's worth it. It's very much worth it. And I admit, I intended to see this in theaters because I was really excited when I saw the trailer, and it was in and out of theaters before I could like get my head around like going outside to go see it.
Yeah, outside bad, inside good. So
yeah, it was the middle of the winter. Outside was bad. So yeah, definitely worth it to see this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I am so excited to go behind the costumes. We have director and writer James Samuel and costume designer Antoinette Messam. You will know her work from Orphan, Creed, Colossal, Hold the Dark, The Harder They Fall, Secret Headquarters, and right now on Netflix, Lift.
Yeah, that's a good one. I just watched that the other day, right before we prepared for this episode of Kevin Hart. It's quite funny. I
have to take a look
love
at that.
The Harder They Fall. That's such a great movie. And I mean, I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but I love Orphan. That's one of my favorite horror movies. It is so creepy. Have you never seen Orphan?
Okay. No, I haven't.
That's so spooky.
I didn't start watching scary movies till I was in college. So most of the ones I've seen, I saw with y'all.
My bad. Oh, man.
Well, Spencer, I am very, very excited to hear your interview with Antoinette. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited to say that Antoinette Messam came by to talk about her work on the Book of Clarence. And it was such a great conversation. I've known Antoinette for a little while now, but this was our first time really getting to sit down and actually talk about her work and her career, because we usually run into each other at parties. So this was our first time actually like sitting down and getting to know each other and talk about her work. So yeah, I'm very excited for you all to listen. We really get into great detail about the Book of Clarence. We also did talk about her recent film on Netflix, Lift. That will be published on the Art of Costume website, so you could all go and read that part of the interview as well.
Yes.
Just for the sake of time. So enjoy the interview, and after the interview, come back so Elizabeth and I can play our favorite game.
Yes.
I am so excited to introduce my friend, costume designer Antoinette Messam. Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm okay.
You're busy, booked and busy.
Yeah, just a little, as we were just saying, a lot of movies in my head right now, but
As I said behind the scenes, I'm excited to have this time with you because I feel like we're always in similar spaces, but I never really get to know you as the designer. So you've had such a successful career, not just in costume, but also in fashion. So I just want to know a little bit more about like your background, because I hear about this fashion background of Antoinette. I'm like, I want to hear about that too.
I know it's so interesting that you mentioned that. I was speaking to a commercial production house in Toronto who was, reached out to congratulate me on Lyft because they just saw it and they loved it. And I'm like, you guys stop booking me. And they're like, oh, you still do commercials and music videos? Hell yeah. Because I have to give props to that part of my life. It really, I think, helped me set the base for where I am now. I mean, a lot of people really separate the stylist from the costume designer, but there's many, many layers of styling and different lanes you could be in styling. And I love the one I was in. I mean, I've always loved clothes, period. I grew up in it, whether I wanted to be in it or not. It was in my life. Between my mother and my grandfather, there was fabrics and clothes, and my mother's a beautiful she makes beautiful clothes still to this day if we allow her to sew. But I modeled as a kid, but what I loved was what the people who I was working for was doing, and I remember working for someone who I work with now and have worked with for many years, Izzy Camilleri. I was young, I was still modeling, and I assisted a designer now, Deborah Ferguson, when she was still in Toronto, on a fashion show. And Deborah was so creative. She used to get the coolest gigs back then. And I just loved how she was styling the clothes, dressing the models as before they went out to the runway. I'm like, I want to do that. And of course, it went from doing some of that to then helping at a production company that, God bless them, they gave me the biggest start, was Revolver Films, that did a lot of big music videos back in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I did Floria Sigismondi. I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong.
It's pretty good. So
yeah, her first music video in Toronto, and it was Blue Rodeo, which is a Canadian band that Canadians know. But back then, that was my first job, and it was just by fluke that I got it. But even then, Floria's style was very goth, very creative, very, you've seen what she's done with Christina Aguilera, and it's otherworldly. So bring that down a little smaller. And I was dressing a child in ratty clothes, but it was a Canadian fashion piece. You know what I mean? But I was breaking it down on set, and I just loved it. And I think if you're asking me, the early days, there was fashion involved, but what I loved about it was creating things within fashion. I'll never forget this. I was doing a shoot with one of my model friends because I was lucky to have friends who I could call in to do creative stuff. And a dear friend, Charmaine, was in town from Paris. And Charmaine was working with Patrick Kelly and Azadina Laya.
Wow.
But she was my friend. So she did this for me. And the makeup artist is like, we have Charmaine Bernard, and you're putting her in doilies. I literally tapped with a thread doilies, placing them on her body, and it was black and white, and all you saw is her ebony skin and the doilies, the lacy doilies. And he's like, bitch, I was expecting Gucci. I have never forgotten that. And I felt so bad at the time that I wasted this incredible makeup artist's time because I recognized the business. It would have sold for us both better if she was in high-end fashion. But that's not what interested me. I just loved her tone, her color, her face, and I just wanted to put her in, do something texture, you know?
Yeah, and it's all about like the trajectory though. Like we all go through these stories in life to end up getting us to where we're supposed to be now too. So I mean, you know, it's a part of the creative process that made you the costume designer you are today too. So with that, so with that, we have a ton of costumes to talk about. So let's start with the Book of Clarence. And you know, you and I already talked about it, but I just have to give you your flowers again. I thought this was such a brilliant film. The colors, the music, the sets, and of course the costumes. So to begin, what drew you to the Book of Clarence?
James Samuel. And he didn't even, it wasn't even drama. He was like, are you ready? We're going. Let's go.
I kind of had a feeling. So, I mean, to my next question then, you worked with James Samuel on The Harder They Fall as well. So tell me a little bit about the collaboration between you two, because it sounds very intimate, actually.
You know, when I first met James, it was, he was in London and it was via Zoom. So we didn't get to meet in person. And I was just honored to even have the opportunity to interview for this film because I heard some of the names that had gone before and I'm like, wow, okay, I'll take that meeting. Yes. Yeah. And, you know, I read the script and it was obviously period. So you instinctively think you're going to go down the lane of just doing period reference research, which I did. But then I also looked at who was making this movie. And I did my research on them. And James did some of his own creative things, videos and a short film. And even though some of it was period and character driven, they were all very fashion forward and he loves clothes. Okay. One of our first in-person meetings in London, in Toronto, where were we? LA, was walking along Melrose and looking at clothes and going to Fred Siegel and shopping for him. Together. He just popping and shop. We were going for a coffee and we ended up shopping in Fred's.
He ended up working on this coffee talk.
Yeah, but getting to know each other. And I realized, so when I did, you know, for that interview, just to test the waters, I dropped in a few fashion images. And then he came back and he wanted more. So what I found is he gravitated to references that were inspiration as compared to literal.
Right.
And he wasn't making a literal movie. His exact words was, I'm not making no dusty, dirty cowboy movie, Antoinette. His background is Nigerian, growing up in London amongst Jamaicans and other Caribbean islands. So as soon as he said that, and I responded to him by Jamaican dialect, he's like, you're a yardie? Oh my God. Then the whole tone of the conversation changed and we bonded on music. He started playing me songs and music that he was going to have in the film that were music that I grew up on, you know? And so that was amazing that we connected first with music and then with fashion, and how then are we going to incorporate this into the movie. And color is so important to James. We used to have butt heads. And when I say that, it's like, Antoinette, where's the color? And I'm like, it's coming, James. Because in a fit-in, he's just seen someone look dark with maybe a pop of color, but not enough color. He wanted color. That was scripted that Idris was going to be in the red jacket, but that's a whole other story. In the red jacket. So I didn't have a choice in putting Idris in the red jacket. And then obviously his favorite color is blue. So let's put Virginia in blue. But color was his life. He loved color and music. But it wasn't until the cast got on the set and he saw how the colors worked with the set, then he got it, right?
Yeah, it works with everything.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, it was tough when we went because of COVID. So even though we started with James coming over to my shop at Western and hanging out and calling the actors and showing them the illustrations and some of the clothes, that was amazing. And then COVID happened. And then he was like this from me. So other than text and video, I barely got to see him. But I got it. I got and got his style. And that was the hardest line, just walking that walk of the base silhouette and how much the studio wanted fashion. They had setting up their store, and how much I know James and Jay-Z were interested in having fashion influences, but still not making it jarring for me as a costume designer. That was my biggest challenge. And I felt there's places I felt I hit it on the nose and it worked. And then there's other places where I still cringe when I see it.
I mean, that's normal. I hear that all the time.
Yeah. But that, just to answer your question, we bonded there, and then he dropped me into Italy and left me to my, it's like, make it happen.
Right. Well, so the Book of Clarence tells stories through the eyes of people of color in a biblical setting. So what sources of inspiration did he draw from to reimagine and create these costumes for familiar figures, but it really is your all own take on these figures that, you know, people are familiar with?
I wish I could tell you there was a plan and there was time.
Sometimes no plan's the best plan.
Well, that's what happened. And I say thank you every day that it all fell into place and worked. When I got the call, I was in Jamaica and we were 12 weeks out. And I still had to get back to first Toronto to drop off my parents. It's like, we're going home. Let's go back. But also to get back to LA, meet with James, find out what is it we're doing. You know, the trigger was pulled very quickly on this film because of Benedict's availability. So when I got to Italy, we were like 8 weeks out.
Oh my gosh.
Not gonna lie, I was panicking.
Yeah.
And, you know, crewing, setting up, we prepped in Rome. And so in terms of finding that research, I mean, I spent a couple of hours with James just to get an idea of what are we making? You know, I read the script, but knowing who I'm working with, what music are you doing, guy?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the mood.
Yeah, it's not as easy as reading the script.
No, with part of it, Paul, he literally had the songs written into the script lines. So you knew the lead up
That's cool.
to what he was thinking. And that's why we bonded, because all those songs were early Jamaican reggae songs by Jimmy Cliff and, you know, people I knew. But there were none of those linear notes in the new script. So I needed a tone. What was the tone? And then we're going to Matera, which is so beautiful. So what was important to me is we're making a Black film. And when I say Black film, the characters in the film that are driving this story are Black.
Mm-hmm.
In 33 AD. How did they get there?
Yeah.
So my first source of research is just trying to find out the facts, the you know, what was truth, what would I have to reimagine, what would I have to create out of, well, there's nothing that say it didn't exist. But the fact is, it did exist. We did find research, especially in tombs, historical tombs. I even saw that in the museums in Italy and took beautiful references once I got there. But before that, deep diving and seeing that there were African Jews who were in Israel and Jerusalem. There were Arabs who came through from the North Coast along the trade routes. Wow. So there was a migration to that part of the world that was not just who we see that is documented, that there's enough scholars who have done the research. And I've got to give a shout out to Western costume research for, as I'm literally packing my kit, is helping me with research, running. I had one day to get over there and spent the day looking at, Michael Douglas's costume in Spartacus. And the actual touching it, you know? And then they had already started to pull books and reference for me to read through. And they were, the two of them were actually helping me as I'm doing, like it was tag teaming, because I literally had the day getting on a plane the next day. But I have to say thank you, Western Costume Research, who I don't
Shout
know.
out.
Yeah, shout out that people realize the amazing resource we have at Western Costumes in their research.
Wow. I mean, it's such a, like you said, it's a long time ago, but there's still so much research out there if you're able to look for it and really inspire the story, which, you know, it came out quite beautifully. And as you mentioned earlier, James Samuel's a big fan of color, and I feel like color played a huge role in the Book of Clarence. So how did you use colors to define the character's style while also communicating their status in society, I felt?
Wow. You know, that was hard. Harder than the harder they fall. It was hard because until I got to Matera, we prepped in Rome, which all those incredible rental houses are, Torelli, Ferrani, Peruzzi, and shout out to Paris who shipped stuff in for us. It didn't really click. I mean, obviously I landed in Rome. The first thing I did is, just knowing the amount of background, I started pulling what was available to me. And I'm literally on the phone with James saying, look, scanning, this is a tone. And he's like, okay, but what about the light colors, the beiges, the brown, you know, because he loved Jesus of Nazareth and that sort of neutral vibe, which is very different from the color way he usually goes to. So that kind of threw me off. And I'm like, I thought this man wanted color.
Yeah, wait a second.
It wasn't until I got to Matera, I went to meet with him because we were prepping in Rome, but they were in Matera, which is like 4 hours drive away, a little further north, or an hour flight. So I went in to meet him and spent the weekend, and I landed on Plymouth Rock. It's like, oh, walking around and seeing the sand tones, the natural, then the blue sky. It was a contrast of just everything being so organically neutral, like the word tan and beiges and creams. And I'm like, how do I make it that these people don't jar? They're not jarring. The contrast is so harsh, but I still have color, you know? And one of the things we had decided early on when I first met with him in LA is Italians are known for making beautiful biblical movies, you know? And there is a lot of them that have a lot of what I call haberdashery, you know, a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of trim, a lot of beading, layers, colors, beautiful fabrics. But the script was so gritty, you know, it was so, these guys are down on their luck, they're hustlers. If they were now and living in an urban area, there'd be a little swag, a little, you know, they wouldn't be in high fashion. They wouldn't have a lot of things, because also I had to show the progression. So being in Matera, it started to click of how I can use that. That was my background. That was my location. All the casts were up against these neutral tones. So having it be complementary, and then the pops of color. And also too, I mean, the beggar. Yeah. That was first big challenge. How do I have this beggar read? And I just felt it was important to have him almost that he could blend into the walls, into the ground, into the scenery, and not be seen because he doesn't want anyone to see him.
Yeah. Wow. So with that, I was struck by the breakdown of these costumes, as well as we mentioned, the fabrics and the textures, which really brought a feeling of authenticity to it. Like you just mentioned with the beggar, he was able to blend in with the crowd. So tell me a little bit more about just your use of fabrics, textiles, and maybe the breakdown process.
Breakdown is my life.
It's my favorite. I could talk
It's
about
my
forever.
favorite. Yeah. If in any area, I'm not a strong sewer, considering who my family is. I just didn't have the patience.
Yeah.
I love playing in the age of dyer shop, and showing by doing what I'm looking for. The understanding how to speak their language, I think, is important, right?
Mhm.
I almost, believe it or not, had a hard time finding the fabrics I was looking for immediately in Italy. It took a minute, and it took a minute for the love language of fabric, love language to everybody to be on the same page. But I needed organic textiles that were dyeable, because I knew I would have to dye the tones I needed, especially for the lead actors. And we built all the lead actors' clothes. Most of the cast principal clothes were made in-house. I had some of the most incredible cutters and stitchers. Like, it was a procession. It's like muslin, fitting, continue costume, to aging, back to the stitchers,
Yeah. A factory lineup.
Right. It was a factory lineup. Shout out to my Italian crew, amazing craftspeople, amazing patience with Antoinette. We were a family. By the end, we were all in it together, and I'm so blessed to have had them. But it was a procession, and I just gave him a shout out on Instagram. Augusto, who was my head agent dyer, used to work for Ferrani, and he used to do textiles for Ferrani. I didn't know that when I hired him.
Oh.
I didn't find that out until I brought some samples of textiles that I loved, the dyes and the layering of dyeing, and how they incorporated natural organic materials into it, like straw, like leaves, stuff like that. And he's like, I made it.
Okay. All right.
So that was a check for me. And yeah, so it was just really great having not only their expertise. I mean, they've all done biblical over and over again. So having their expertise to show me different ways we could do things or cheat things. And our biggest challenge, aside from having the look be somewhat true to the period, is organic, if that makes sense. Because as you say, it's almost like the harder they fall. I had different cities within this movie, different areas that showed different class structure. And one of the things that I needed to introduce, because we had Romans, but we only had Romans really in uniform, except for when we came to that trial, right? And I needed to how do I influence the wealthy in this town so that they don't all look the same? So I had to bring elements of Rome. So you saw a little bit of it when Rome attire, which would have been Greek influence too.
Yeah.
That was the elite. That was a class structure. So bringing some of that into, say, Jedediah's harem, if you want to call it, his boudoir, his club, really club,
Yeah.
and a men's club, and seeing elements so that I could show the diverse class structures. You see the cast, Clarence and Elijah walking in, and they obviously look very different than the people who are in that setting. Yeah. And that's the same with the beggar. Who was the beggar before he became destitute? Maybe he was Roman and fell on hard times. I had to figure something out. What kind of costume am I going to give this guy that differentiates him a little bit from the others,
Wow. You really had to think of a lot of different cultures and
inspirations,
and it's a lot.
As I was running, it was crazy. And that's why I keep saying it over and over again. the every job is a learning experience. And we're literally figuring this out as we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And my first Italian cutter, I started one and then the second one joined me, couldn't speak a word of English to me. So we had an interpreter, my junior design assistant, best position in the world, with us, Jessica, and she would help. But what we had in common is what we were doing. She allowed me to drape on the fabric. And when I say allow, meaning just seeing where I was going, because I needed to drape the fabric to show her so that we could workshop it, you know? So the two of us, I have a picture of the two of us on the ground, wrapping and figuring the fabric out and which one. And yeah, so it was a work in progress. There wasn't time to sit down and do research and development. We did it on the fly.
Right. Oh, man, that's a lot. What I loved about this film, I'm not much of a jewelry person, but I feel like you converted me. For example, Tiana Taylor, who played Mary Magdalene, I was obsessed with just all the gold accent jewelry on her. So how did the gold accents play a part in your process?
Wow. Well, let's talk about that specific piece for just a second.
It's so good.
Gave me a heart attack. That was James gave me a few reference images when we met in LA for that brief moment. And one of them was a beautiful image of 3 African women from afar, which is northern.
Mm-hmm.
And they had these elaborate jeweled beading gold around their face was covered in it and their head. And I looked at him and I'm like, that's not a period picture.
Yeah.
Said, I want Lady Madeline. She's driving a chariot.
You're like, wait a minute. This is not adding up.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. In other words, make it happen, Antoinette.
Okay.
So that was the challenge. And I did the research, obviously, deep dive in where did this image come from? And that's how I realized that they came from afar, but not just afar, across Northern Africa, these women, as far back as 1000 AD that I could find. I couldn't find anything further than that wasn't a painting. And you could see in the paintings that they were jeweled, but not to that style. So, okay, at least I know it's not just today. It goes back. The materials may have changed, but the style was the same. So I then had to take what was the original inspiration, and we found actual original pieces that I had come from all over the world, shipped into me so that we could see how the shape, and then I had to make it work for somebody who had 3 stunt people.
So much.
It's a stunt. You know, she's actually, and she is badass.
Yeah.
Taylor got behind that chariot and rode that.
I was in. It's like the first few minutes of the film, and I already was like, I'm strapped in. Let's go. Yeah.
So that piece was custom and workshopped to death as we went, because it needed to represent that community, but also it needed to work. As I do a lot of action movies,
mm-hmm.
Creative has to work within a stunt environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hate it, but I have to design around the action, around the stunt, and make sure that my stunt actors are safe and will be safe. How do we make the stunt woman's eyepiece comfortable and line so that if she falls, she won't hurt herself or hurt her eyes. All those things I have to take into consideration when I'm designing it.
Wow.
But rest of the jewelry, We made some in-house.
Okay.
Yeah, some of it, especially some of the beautiful pieces that were worn in the harem, we made. And we found Paris Costumes has an entire floor of collections from different ages of jewelry. So I flew to Spain to do some pulling and pulled a lot of jewelry from Paris. I found jewelry at Rancati. We found jewelry in the African markets in Rome, the vendors who brought up jewelry from Africa. And some of them still very organic and haven't changed in decades, But jewelry was important not only for the minimalism of it, but to show progress with time passage as these men, Clarence's tribe, that they went from having nothing to you start to see the jewelry getting not just, organic beading or shells, it then became metal,
Right. Wow.
So that's where you saw class structure too.
Interesting. So, Antoinette, James McAvoy was recently on Good Morning America, and he gave you quite the shout out regarding a certain curveball he threw you, but he also brought up his love for the armor that his character got to wear. So, I want to ask you, how did the armor come about for the Roman soldiers?
That almost killed me.
I rewatched it this morning. I was like, this doesn't sound like a good story.
It was not. It was not a good story. So we're shooting in Matera, and before we wrapped for the holidays, we had 1 week of stage work in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
The work we did in Rome was the jail cell and the walking on water scene. And we did all of James McAvoy's scenes in Rome. And so I had to fly from Matera to Rome to meet with him before the rest of the crew traveled that weekend. And as per usual, he doesn't land until like Friday. Thursday night, we got there Friday morning, midday. I'm fitting him Friday for camera Monday.
Oh boy. I'm starting to get chills already.
Yes. So I spoke to him. I think I spoke to him like Thursday night before I traveled. This is how tight my casting was on this film.
Mm-hmm.
And again, shout out to the best cutter stitchers ever. Nothing frazzled them. So we had done as scripted as requested by James. He was wearing a, very elaborate toga for his stature. And I told him this when we spoke. And he said, I don't know. I'm thinking I want to be in a uniform. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. And obviously, this is not scripted. This is not, I didn't have enough time to find out how accurate this would be, but he just felt for how he wanted to portray the character. This is the route he wanted to go. Did I mention that Gladiators was prepping at the same time?
You mean the one Janty Yates is doing? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. I mean, it's also cool, but horrible.
Yes. So when I arrived, my crowd supervisor had already gone ahead of me and was fitting her costumes for the background scenes because there was a lot of Roman soldiers and some of them were stunts. And she's like, I think I've taken everything that is left. I don't know that there's a general, like he wouldn't have needed to be of a higher level.
Yeah.
So I pulled one of hers just so he could try it and see if this is what he wanted to do. So when we went, he tried on, he's like, well, this is not, I need to look different from the others. And I said, I know. But I don't know. I can't guarantee that I will be able to. I said, I have every rental house looking to find something in your size
Right.
in the, that is appropriate, because it wasn't even so much that we couldn't find something. I wanted to be sure that it would be the right costume. So I literally had my supervisor, who was still in Matera, contacting Western Costume Military to help me just narrow down, because in Italy, they're going to tell me, oh, it's fine. It'll be
It's not fine.
oh, let me at least see what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Right. So we got that. And obviously the one I was putting on him was not accurate, because it would have been a much junior.
Mm-hmm.
But he tried it and he's like, oh, wool makes me itch.
Oh.
Because the under tunics were all made out of wool, makes me itch. And okay, great. One of my a cutter and a stitcher's here. We can cut a lining to put under something. I said, I'm going to try my hardest to find you the accurate costume.
Mm-hmm.
So we literally had to go dig back into the back walls of, I think we found something at Peruzzi, a couple that were close enough. And when he tried it on, he went into allergic reaction.
Oh, gosh. I'm stressed out right now.
We had to call the doctor. I'd already asked the first ADs, and they were really supportive, to change the shooting schedule for Monday to have him first be in the white toga for the jail scene, so that I had time to fit him in the morning before he went to camera, and then line whichever of the uniforms. We only found two, whichever one worked. And then we'd have a couple of hours to get it prepped and for him to be ready for camera. And the studio was there that day. Legendary was there that day.
Oh my God.
He went into a massive allergic reaction. We had to get the hospital, get someone there. They stopped shooting. They said, put him back and let him wear the other. I said, let him. This is James McAvoy. He wants to wear this costume. He wants somebody to give him an EpiPen or medication or whatever.
Yeah.
He's wearing a uniform in that scene. We steamed dryer balls, lined the costume. Doctor came, gave him a shot. He was wearing that costume and he wore that costume.
Nice.
But I had the producers, the studio, a doctor standing outside of the trailer as I'm dressing him for camera. My hands were like this.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to take out the actor before the scene. And I'm getting James texting me, just put him in something else. And I'm like, he said no.
Yeah, you come here and tell him. Oh my gosh.
That's above my pay scale.
Yeah. Come on, man.
I dress them. I don't tell them what to do.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate this story because, I talk to a lot of designers, but I don't often hear like the hard times, it's always not that, we don't have our struggles, but I appreciate the story because it's not always a glamorous job at all. And this is proof to it, but it came out and everyone appears to be happy. And I think it worked out for the best. Would you say?
Yeah. And that was really, really sweet of him to acknowledge what he put us through.
Yeah. I mean, he knows.
He knows, he's a pro. He knows, and he was right. He just looked at me and says, you'll be fine. You'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Almost off my job guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Well, with that, I mean, I'm just so happy for you. I'm just really excited to see what you're doing next. It's really such a joy, and I'm so glad that we're able now to talk about these films. Costume designer Antoinette Messam, I hope you will come back again. Thank you so much for coming. This was so fun.
No, thank you. And thank you for going to see the Book of Clarence. That makes me really happy.
Of course. I want to see it again, honestly. And I hope you'll come back hopefully around Halloween this year so we could talk about The Orphan. I still want to do that.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you, Antoinette.
Bye.
Hi, this is Dan, audio engineer of the podcast, here to let you know that if you wanted to support the show, you can head over to theartofcostume.com/podstore. There you can buy some awesome TeePublic merch with the podcast logo, such as a shirt, coffee mug, stickers, and of course, a baby onesie. Thanks for all your support.
Spencer, that was amazing.
That was such a fun interview. I could listen to Antoinette talk forever. She's just so in depth. I mean, she's a professional.
Oh yeah. that was amazing. That was really, really interesting. And I cannot wait now to play our favorite game.
Yeah, well, let's do it. Daniel, you know what to do.
The one costume to rule them all.
Spencer, what's your one costume to rule them all?
This was a hard one, actually. I kind of struggled this week to figure out what. There's just so many great costumes in this film. It's quite a large film too. There's so many costumes, so it's hard to sit on one. But I think the one that just like really captivated me before I even saw the film in terms of like the trailer and then going into the film, I really loved. It was the costume worn by Tiana Taylor, who played Mary Magdalene when she's in the chariot with the gold jewelry and the cape just like following behind her. I thought it was spectacular, and I just loved the colors. The use of color in this film in general was just brilliant, and I think Antoinette did an incredible job with it. And I'm not much of a jewelry person, but this film kind of converted me. I was really struck by the use of gold and just jewelry in general.
That's very, very true. They really use jewelry well in this. And jewelry is a little bit of part of my one costume to rule them all, which is Clarence's all white Messiah look.
Yeah, at the party.
At the party, he is just ready to woo his woman. And I love it because it's so like quintessentially like a Messiah Jesus-y look, but perfectly tailored to the character of Clarence.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It is so perfect. I also have to give an honorable mention to Benedict Cumberbatch's character once he has been cleaned up and looks like just the like stereotypical white Jesus.
That's so funny.
I was laughing so much. It was so hard. It was so perfectly executed.
Yeah.
So perfectly executed. It was fantastic. She did an incredible job across the board.
I love that too, because I remember I found out just before I saw that Benedict Cumberbatch was in it. And the whole time you're watching the movie, you're like, are you sure he's in it? You know, like just kind of looking at every character like, something's not adding up. And then when you see the big reveal, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So funny. I love that Benedict Cumberbatch wanted to do that role too. You know?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was so that's another thing about this movie. The casting is flawless.
Oh yeah, it's
like
every character, every cast member was brilliant in this film.
There's not a lot of movies that I watch where I'm like, oh yeah, you couldn't have cast this any other way, but this is definitely one of those movies.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. And Elizabeth, that is the Book of Clarence episode. What a fun one. It was an
That was so much fun.
unexpected like banger to me, you know?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, if you all loved what you heard in this episode, or maybe you want to tell us what your one costume to rule them all is, don't forget to leave us a voicemail at 626-515-1826 or email us at theartofcostume@gmail.com. We want to know what your favorite costume was, so hit us up. Don't worry. And we won't bother you with spam or prank calls or anything. Though, actually, now that I say it out loud, that would be kind of fun. But I promise I won't.
Yes, we will not. We absolutely will not prank call you or spam email you.
Can you imagine getting a prank call from us, though? It would be funny. Anyways.
People would be confused.
Elizabeth, what are we watching for our next episode?
I am so excited. We've waited a long time for this. Next week, we are watching Dune Part 2.
Oh, finally. We could finally talk about the next Messiah, the Lisan al-Gaib.
Absolutely. And if you would like some visuals with what you're hearing, check out our YouTube at youtube.com/@theartofcostume. Or if you want some content in between episodes, you can follow us at The Art of Costume Pod on Instagram or at The Art of Costume on TikTok. And like we said, it's getting warm. So if you need a little like t-shirt or something to wear out and about, I don't know, in your garden, on a nice nature walk, you can go to theartofcostume.com/pod store and pick yourself up a Art of Costume podcast t-shirt.
Yes. I still haven't let go of the Art of Costume podcast swimsuit. That is still very much in the works.
Sure. Okay.
If you love what
Whatever
you
you
heard,
say.
don't forget to leave us a 5-star text review on Apple Podcasts. And you can also rate us on Spotify as well, which we very much appreciate.
Yes.
Elizabeth, it's been so good to see you. I am so excited to hear
Me
that
too.
the musicale is going well, even if you have to sew a bunch of corsets. So have fun with that. Let me know if you need anything.
Thank you. I will. Definitely will let you know if I need anything from California.
Yep. Available to help. Thank you all so much for listening.
Have a fantastic week.
The Art of Costume podcast is hosted and produced by Elizabeth Joy Glass and Spencer Williams. Our audio engineering and editing is done by Dan White. Follow us on TikTok at The Art of Costume and Instagram at The Art of Costume Pod. If you want to support the show, go to theartofcostume.com/podstore. For more podcast updates, costume reviews, deep dives, and interviews, go to theartofcostume.com, a blog dedicated to highlighting the best in costume design.